back to the English class, my dear students. In the last class, we learned about the background of the man with the scar. The writer's companion had narrated him that the man with the scar was once a revolutionary general who was captured by the government troops. There were 5 of his friends together and they were court-martialed. They were to be shot dead the next morning. They spent the night in the jail playing poker. The man with the scar had lost most of the games he played that night, and the next morning came. Akoigi mamagi class today koina ningsing ko koina tawkibada ningsing ko ngangsa. Writers gi mamana basina mangon da wari lirakre mamai da dak leba nupa du kana no hais. Amata mamada la lobagi lo chingba moirami. Ma government gi lalmi single land technique. Mamai tiki moi manga punna faki mai party ni pula punna. Mai court martial tawre nonga laga nongwaina ka pa hat kani hadana makoigi rai tare. Magi tanti pire ahing demoy poker ko bo jor makal ma sanraga len ki bani jail da ahing du da sanaba match coding po gi bani aya mana po gi bani nearly 6 times kumadi mana win taw gi ha matang ge apply ko ngasa adu di para par se ko. They were led into the patio. No si patio na pa do ko not patio. They were led into the patio of the jail, and here this is also jail, not gaol. They were led into the patio of the jail and placed against the wall, the 5 of them side by side, with the firing party facing them. There was a pause, and our friend asked the officer in charge of them what the devil they were keeping him waiting for. The officer said the general commanding the government troops wished to attend the execution and they awaited his arrival. Then I have time to smoke another cigarette, said our friend. He was very unpunctual. Now let's just analyze, let's discuss the lesson line by line. They were led into the patio of the jail and placed against the wall. Patio is an open ground within a wall compound. They were led into the patio of the jail and placed against the wall, the 5 of them side by side, with the firing party facing them. The next morning came. The government troops came to the jail and took the man with the scar with his friends into an open ground of the jail, and they were asked to stand against the wall, the 5 of them side by side with the firing party facing them. They were to be shot dead and the firing party was ready. Nongale, makoi mga adu pulap, lautok palae, sipai singna, adaga makoi jail gi lamhang amagi, lamhang amada putore, wall amagada, pulap thame, moi mga adu thang lepale. Aduga makoi da nongwaina ka pag hat ka doriba, firing party do ready delere. There was a pause, and our friend asked the officer in charge of them what the devil they were keeping him waiting for. What the devil is a phrase expressing an annoyance. The firing party did not kill the condemned man at once. There was a pause. It made the man with the scar a little bit annoyed. He asked the officer in charge of the firing party the reason of the delay and what they were waiting for. When atang lepel hati ba ko purak pageta. Adagidi officer in charge the hange hoziki kenosina mamai da dak lay panu pass na ko. Matam do di ma dak lay trick adaw koi lesson zigi matungina mabu man with the scar and hare lalo bugi luching base. Mala hange ba kadi ngai no hat odi ko halon ma hare. Tanjada the officer in charge of the firing squad said that the officer said that the general commanding the government troops wished to attend the execution and they awaited his arrival. The officer in charge replied that they were waiting for the general commanding the government troops because he had said that he wished to attend the execution. Ma moi mga hat pado yeng na bagi dang government gi troop ki luching bado commander in chief to magi general do lakning ni haiba adu ngai din hai hosiki officer in charge na. Then hosiki man with the scar mamai the dark label no pass man hai. Then I have time to smoke another cigarette, said our friend. He was always unpunctual. Adu hirdi oh nagi army general dung ai duribra mala ka doi tardi ai churut am tang thaki gen nangni madi yamna unpunctual le pa ma khakne hai re ko. The man with the scar heard the reply of the officer in charge and said that he would have time to smoke a cigarette because the general of the government troops was always very unpunctual. But he had barely lit it when the general, it was San Ignacio by the way, I don't know whether you have ever met him, followed by his ADC, came into the patio. The usual formalities were performed, and San Ignacio asked the condemned men whether there was anything they wished before the execution took place. 4 of the 5 shook their heads, but our friend spoke. But he barely lit it when the general, it was San Ignacio, by the way, I don't know whether you have ever met him, followed by the ADC, came into the patio. He had barely lit it. He just had lit the cigarette. The general, the name of the general is San Ignacio. General, I don't know whether you have ever met him. He was followed by his ADC, came into the patio. Hoziki general with his ADC. ADC is full form the 8D camp habani. Aduga magi arthana karhabnobu. ADC is a military officer acting as a confidential assistant to a senior officer. Senior officer magi mateng pangnana bugidang talaiba confidential assistant to ADC kawai. Now the man with his car was ready to smoke. But as soon as he lit his cigarette, the general arrived at the patio. The name of the general was San Ignacio, and the writer's companion asked him whether he had ever met him. The general was accompanied by his assistant. Mana churu tak chambaga General San Ignacio zilai. Writers ki mamana bisna mangun hangai. Nangbu San Ignacio zi unagra unadribai bu khangdrine. Aduga mana maka tarai haziki general zika magi ADC ga punna patio da lampak da changa enai. The usual formalities were performed, and San Ignacio asked the condemned men whether there was anything they wished before the execution took place. 4 of the 5 shook their heads, but our friend spoke. Yes, I would like to say goodbye to my wife. Formalities here refers to certain rules and conventions, and the condemned men refer to the men who were given death penalty. The usual formalities were performed means as the general of the government troops had arrived, the execution was to take place. Certain formalities were performed according to the rules and the conventions before killing the victims. Then General San Ignacio asked the condemned men, the dying men, if they had any wish. Last one hiding again hangeba. So such last wishes of the dying men are generally fulfilled. Last wishing but 4 of the 5 condemned men shook their heads, indicating that they had no wishes. But the man with the scar said something. Yes, I would like to say goodbye to my wife. He said that he would like to say goodbye to his wife. It was his last wish. Bueno, said the general. I have no objection to that. Where is he? She is waiting at the prison door. Then it will not cause a delay of more than 5 minutes. Hardly that, Senor General. Have him placed on one side. Now, the man with the scar said, Man high grade na ay nupi ko ta kainer again. Ay mangon ta kainer again. Goodbye na ta kainer ba pami habida. Bueno, said the general. Bueno is a Spanish word and which means okay. Yare her generals na. Okay. Nangi nupi ta utang kainer again. Haida ba pama na tronang za. Yes. I have no objection to that. Other day yet teko. Where is he? Kai lebe nang nupi di. General San Ignacio agreed to the last wish of the man with the scar. He said, Bueno, meaning okay or agreed. And then he said that he had no objection to it. He asked the man with the scar where his wife was. Nang nupi ka lebe no hari. Amaduna komay, she is waiting at the prison door. Ma ada jail get the lady. The man with the scar replied that his wife was waiting at the prison door. Then it will not cause a delay of more than 5 minutes. Adudi minute mga pa na chondaro ineko. Hardly that, Senor General. Senor is also a Spanish word which means sir. Sir General, minute mga do haroye. Have him placed on one side. Then San Ignacio asked his soldiers to take the man with the scar away and have him placed on one side. Two soldiers advanced, and between them, the condemned rebel walked to the spot indicated. The officer in command of the firing squad, on a nod from the general, gave an order. There was a ragged report, and the 4 men fell. They fell strangely, not together, but one after the other, with movements that were almost grotesque, as though they were puppets in a toy theater. The officer went up to them and into one who was still alive, emptied 2 chambers of his revolver. Our friend finished his cigarette and threw away the stuff. Now, 2 soldiers advanced, Sipai and Anjale, and between them the condemned rebel walked to the spot indicated. Saint Ignacio, koi government troop ki Sipai makoksin haire dina. Sino pa jame de halaroizi. Ngatanga gi mahat pazima because mamai ni pigum ta again hairi. Adudi matawan thamo haire dina. So as Saint Ignacio ordered his soldiers to take away the rebel, that is the man with the scar, to another side, 2 of the soldiers came forward and took the man with the scar to the spot indicated by the general. General tak pasagado progress no pass. Rebel. Rebel means a person who rises against the government with arms. Sarkar ki mayokta kulai paragal lepkhat liba adugumba kanagumba lalhobu nupa ma buniko rebel haisa. So condemn rebel apam da sigadaroba lalhobu nupa do ma putho sakre tongan nakanu thamgre. The officer in charge of the firing squad, on a nod from the general, gave an order. There was a ragged report and the 4 men fell. The officer in charge of the firing squad, officer in charge commands, on a nod from the general. Nod means nod that chap a short, quick downward bending forward of the head. Short, quick downward bending of the head. Means this high government ki troop ki general regi signal ma tak phangbaga my officer in commands na gave an order ma kapo ya thang pigre. There was a ragged report. Ragged report means there was a harsh, very loud noise. Ragged report means a loud noise. A harsh sound of gunshot. Ahuba konomai kapai makol mataki and the 4 men fell no pamari tukre. General Saint Ignacio gave a sign, nodding his head, and after that, the officer in command of the firing squad gave an order to shoot the 4 condemned men, and they fell on the ground. Matangi lines yang sa koi Manipur textbook yaw dabani, but it's there in the original text yaw bani. Ay para ke ko masi koi by mistake chithara mo masuya or deliberately to masuya ko yang se. They fell strangely not together. No mai pale, no pa kan da moi mariza. Pulap to mina de. I'm not tuan tu do ni ko. One after the other, with movements that were almost grotesque. Moi can say moi na tu bagi mongza very ugly or distorted. Paireng tureng tu do ni ko no mai pala matung da mi si bagi ta ba do ni tu do ni kanana kamai tu ge do di mong tongan leba. As though they were puppets in a toy theater. Ko lai di toy zi ko ge puppets ai ko hang lai ga hebado, a movable model of a person or animal that's typically moved either by strings controlled from above or by hand inside it. Toy theater amada sana potching theater amada puppet mayam sina ko gi tu bugumna makoi mayam do amna nokning mamong da matang fereng tureng tu gi ko phajana pulap tu boy deba noi pala kandra. Now the officer went up to them and into the one who was still alive emptied 2 barrels of his revolver. Our friend finished his cigarette and threw away the stuff. 4 men fell dead on the ground. The officer in charge went up to them to see whether they were dead or not, and found that one was still alive. Check the wala moi noi kap ki mari do kamai tori gen yeng bala amadi hingle reme hingamon pa do by this time the man with the scar mana ko gi tanjas da ko okay mana moi yeng lak pes da ama hingle reme hingmon pa da officer in charge na hosiki commander duna ko gi magon da yoram ba magi nomai gi barrel chamber ani loidro kapsale ko amada to make sure that the man was dead. He shot 2 barrels of his revolver to the man who was still alive to make sure that he was dead. By the time our friend, means the man with the scar, had finished his cigarette, machu tapado loire and threw away the stub. Stub means the short remaining part of a cigarette. Churu tapoi lor pe maning matek tuniko adulam tokre. Mamanda madi sire, madi hingauri, madi mai nupido dan goodbye hiring happening ko. Machuru dang thalai bani, churu to loire was matek tulang tokre. There was a little stir at the gateway. A woman came into the patio with quick steps, and then, her hand on the heart, she stopped suddenly. She gave a cry, and with outstretched arms ran forward. Karamba, said the general. There was a little stir at the gateway. Little stir means a little movement at the gateway. A woman came into the patio with quick steps, and then, her hand on her heart, she stopped suddenly. The man's wife was allowed to come into the patio to meet her husband. As she entered, there was a little movement at the gateway. She came in with quick steps and stopped suddenly, putting her hand on her heart. Gateway de kitang lengna rei ko. Adi nupi du channel padu da ko mi myam kitang mareng chale. nupi ma changjalai maje makhong yam thuna thanga lai then makut to mathabak da thamaga maje chalo lep ki ka she gave a cry ma kappe and with outstretched arms makuting to outstretched arms means with arms stretched makut ting to ran forward jale mas. Perhaps she was shocked to see the dead bodies lying there, but seeing her husband still alive, she gave a cry and ran forward towards her husband with her arms stretched. Caramba, said the general. Caramba is a Spanish word expressing surprise. Angak pa matau phongdok pa niko general na maze ngak pudu ne ba ai sena ko kari gino di nupi sa am satin na masak phazawa na chelai ba nupi hojigi la lo ba sigadar bu nupa jina amuk tang unazaram ge heriba agi nupi de goodbye haram ge nupi ja masak sa khupa jam toy ba masak tu ubada army general ai sena caramba na my expression am ka phongdore ka mana. She was in black with a veil over her hair and her hair was dead white. She was hardly more than a girl, a slim creature with little regular features and enormous eyes, but they were distraught with anguish. Her loveliness was such that as she ran, her mouth slightly open and agony of her face beautiful. A gasp of surprise was wrung from those indifferent soldiers who looked at her. She was in black. She was wearing black dress ka. Dress because her husband was going to die. My nupasi dorobanina chatnabigi matungna traditionally, customarily, ma black dress sele. With a veil over her hair. Veil is a piece of fine material worn by women to protect or conceal the face or hair ko. Masam ka ki kumzinaba nupising mai thongda mamai kumzinaba uppa adu mai kumdu ne ko. Nupisi mai kum uppi adu mai kumdu masam do uppe ko. Dress the black dress ne masak kuchu kuma to one ko. That white means she was absolutely white. She was hardly more than a girl. Yam no reach a hidu go. She was very young. And a slim creature with little regular features. She was very attractive with slim figure. Figure patak tawad na ko. And little regular features. Little regular features means shapely body parts. Magi mami magi manaton machinban magi other body parts me amze rasi lay na fazena ko gi mong ta na magi organs yauri ko. But enormous eyes mamitin lawi ko. Masapai, masayam phazai, ngorok ngawi, yam sahi nauri. But they were distraught with anguish. Distraught means extremely troubled. Anguish means deep mental pain. She was very young and she was very attractive with her slim figure, shapely body parts and beautiful big eyes. Her eyes were extremely disturbed and with deep mental pain. Her loveliness was such that as she ran, her mouth slightly open and agony of her face beautiful. A gasp of surprise was wrung from the indifferent soldiers who looked at her. The bees na chela kanzida bugo masak chana kupa sam tawraga ade mai thong is awabaga mami ga tar kanda masak phaza mi na waba je dum phaza bane bugo ana phaza chela kanzida minung si khangdaba mi hat pada kaimta nungai taba phawdaba sipai miyam do adu bhaw ngak tnaba sor thabet hon wan sor mapi hon man sidi berani he na ko. As she ran towards her husband with her mouth slightly open and with an agony on her face, she looked so lovely that even the soldiers, those indifferent soldiers, the merciless soldiers who looked at her gasped in surprise. Gasp means air suddenly escaping from the mouth due to surprise. Was wrung. A gasp of surprise was wrung. Was wrung means was forced out from those indifferent soldiers, from those merciless soldiers who looked at her. Mangondi yengiba akwegi minungsi khangdaba sipai myam duwabako ngaktina khangudana masindagi mayadagi swords palo kam thokibani khang aishana. The rebel advanced a step or two to meet her. She flung herself into his arms and with a hoarse cry of passion, Alma de mi corazon, soul of my heart, he pressed his lips into hers. These words, Alma de mi corazon, soul of my heart, these words are not found in your textbook, but it is there in the original text. So I'm just quoting it. You can ignore it also. He pressed his lips to hers, and at the same moment, he drew a knife from his ragged shirt. I have not a notion how he had managed to retain possession of it, and stabbed her in the neck. The blood spurted from the cut vein and dyed his shirt. Then he flung his arms around her and once more pressed his lips to hers. Now the rebel advanced a step or two to meet her. She flung herself into his arms. And with a hoarse cry of passion, he pressed his lips to hers. the woman, the lady, threw herself into his arms, and he pressed his lips into hers. Mana magi machimbanda magi machimbanda pressed. It means they kissed with a hoarse cry of passion. The man kissed his wife. Mana mother-in-law was Alma de mi corazon, soul of my heart. I say it's a French word, niko. It means my heart, my soul. Habako. See, nogi like that. Yauda baniko. She had mana nupas and nupisi conjali. They kissed, and at the same time, mana kissed during as they can. While he was kissing his wife, at the same time, he drew a knife from his ragged shirt. I have not a notion how he managed to retain possession of it, and stabbed her in the neck. Notion means idea. While he was kissing his wife, the man with the scar drew out a knife from his torn shirt and stabbed her in the neck. The narrator says that he did not know how the man with the scar managed to keep the knife with him. Mahaibuko, kamai pairamano khangdeba. Nupasina magi nupize kiss tau na mana thangam sato nupizi makhauri thang thille manako. Mana I have no notion. I have not a notion. Notion means idea. I have no idea how he managed to retain possession of it. How he kept the knife with him. Thang do mana kamai pairamino khangdeba. Jail le baizim masalo check tawgadawni thang guma mi sokpa yaba khusuklai mate yahon ba yadawni ba. Adumanguna thang yoromeba. Narrators nari I don't have any idea how he managed to retain possession of it. And he stabbed. Stab means to pierce the knife. Thang tinted pone at her neck. Makari tinted pone. The blood spurted from the cut vein and the dyed his shirt. Then he flung his arms around her and once more pressed his lips to hers. As he stabbed his wife in the neck, and the blood came out in full force. Spurted means come out in full force from the cut vein, and the blood colored his shirt with red color. After stabbing his wife, the rebel once again hugged her. He kissed her once again. It happened so quickly that many did not know what had occurred. But from the others burst a cry. It happened so quickly that many did not know what had occurred. But from the others burst a cry of horror. They sprang forward and seized him. They loosened his grasp, and the girl would have fallen if the ADC had not caught her. She was unconscious. They laid her on the ground and with dismay on their faces stood around watching her. The rebel knew where he was striking, and it was impossible to staunch the blood. In a moment, the ADC who had been kneeling by her side rose. It happened so quickly that many did not know what had occurred. But from the others, burst a cry of horror. They sprang forward and they seized him. Seized means caught. Everything happened so quickly that many did not know what had happened. But a few others noticed it, and they shouted a cry of horror. They jumped forward and they caught the rebel. Yam thuna thokhreba thodok mayam se mayam khangnadaba yaweba adu akhangba khradi hata kisadra lawra kiba kamra mo pa chongjale adu nupa ta phai moina. They loosened his grasp, and the girl would have fallen if the ADC had not caught her. Mana nupi da chetla kola leiba nupi se napasna. Mana chetla kola ba his grasp means his grip or hold mana chetla pari ba mayam sang loosen tawle thadole. And the girl would have fallen nupi da turam gani if the ADC had not caught her. Karigumba ngasagi general rugi magi assistant na ADC duna pharam draba nupi da turam gani ba. By the time she was unconscious, they laid her on the ground. Then she was placed on the ground slowly. And with dismay on their faces stood round watching her. With dismay on their faces. Mamai the Ningba Kai Bolina. As I am saying, Yangzegi, Nangaki, but the Pazabin Pido. Nupa than a good bike at Hizegi Harambudo. Other change Lagana, Tang Tingibido. I was Ningba Kai and Nukni Yang Labiko. The rebel knew where he was striking, and it was impossible to staunch the blood. Staunch means to stop something from happening, or to stop liquid, especially blood, from flowing out. Staunch the calm, thawdo thondaba, atra igum thondaba staunch koi. Sigi lalo bunupazimukti, he was very skilled. He was an expert in killing. Mi hat amai bunupaneba, tamti bunupaneba ko. Admadi, he knew where he was striking. Man strike the Izaga cry the Noma Kangeba. Means and it was impossible to stop the blood. In a moment, the ADC who had been kneeling by her side rose. She is dead, he whispered. The rebel crossed himself. Why did you do it? Asked the general. And the man replied, I loved her. Wonderful. How's Eddie? She didn't have a she is dead. Napisa Sire. Matap happened, he whispered. Tanzas, the rebel crossed himself. My Nupadana crossed himself, means cross sign to Wudo. A cross sign to Waki meme Sirakanda, Christ cross sign to Wudunico. Koikanagum Bamasi, but the Satkriba Tawai to respect with Pemonduni. The ADC declared with a whisper that the woman was dead. Then the man with the scar made a sign of the cross. Christians do it when somebody is dead as a mark of respect to the departing soul. ADC don't hire the piece of Syrian. Nupada cross sign tole. Tanzas general drangeva was my nupazda. Why did you do it? No. Kagino nang piece the smile authority. No hardly kagino. Nang aside goodbye katang hiram gaidane, Harakans that Nupaz in a period pocums in a mipum halebago. Makari high. I killed her because I loved her. Nungsibegi heart pane and Harry. A sort of sigh passed through those men crowded together as they looked with strange faces at the murderer. The general stared at him for a while in silence. A sort of sigh, Simon's long, deep, audible exhalation expressing sadness. Source hang Hondo Kudunico, Tawai no Itamata Wutlaga. Mayam source hang Holico, Manakta Mimiamda. A Dugmoyams, with strange faces, Angak Pasaktam Golina, Mimiam, Mihat Padri Yangli. Sarkar Gilami Makok General, some young limon want the gang to be youngly. Everybody was shocked to hear his reply. How could men who loved his wife, kill his wife? Mind people, I'm not sure, man, come my hardly knows in the They breathed a deep sigh and they looked at the men with strange faces. The general also remained silent for quite some time and they looked at him with fixed eyes. It was a noble gesture, he said at last. I cannot execute this man. Take my car and have him led to the frontier. Senor, I offer you the homage which is due from one brave man to another. Gesture means a symbolic act, an action that expresses feelings or intentions, although it might have little practical effect. And homage means pay respect. At last, General said Ignacio declared that the action of the rebel was a noble act. It is a noble act because it was a sign of his love. It was a sign of love of the rebel for his wife. He did not want that the lady should suffer or should fall in love with another man after his death. Every self-respecting man who loves his wife would feel the same. The general was deeply impressed by the rebel's gesture. He declared that he could not kill the man. He ordered that his soldiers should take the man to the border in his car and release him. He called the rebel Senor, which is a respectable way of addressing a person as Sir, and said that he had offered him the respect which was due from one brave man to another. The general, said Ignacio, considered himself a brave man, and he found that this man was also a brave man. So, as a sign of, as a way of respecting one brave man by another, he released the man. Said Ignacio, Nupis heart by Madame Zika in Hapa, Mana Magi Nupis, I'm Satin Nuxi, heart by Harpazda, Mazam Satina, impressed Togibata, Tamoy joy Togibata. Kagino di Masana Masabu is a Tozaba, self respecting man, Magi Nupizam Nuxis of Nupama Kagna, Mana Sahino Nasibutam, that Magi Nupi, Sahino Ribi, Masaxu Pazabi Nupido. Adu Hayang Wan and Whatever, not a Gatopa Mima Nuxinagiba, Masimana Kangma Moya, retired by Nupido, Heart Patavane. Aduna Man by Nupido, Heart Pani Harakanzda. General, I'm certainly impressed with the Penza give Adama Highway. Yes, yours is a novel gesture. Nang toys, yay, I'm certain noble, I'm certain a picture job, I'm certain a lame with Tabam connect toys. Sinupas a harping, I cannot execute this man, Sinupazim, the harping amroy. Saloy cars, Puro, Sinupaz Putokro, Aquilebaki, one with the Putokro, border the Putokro, other Manakawi, Sinoran. Tonapa Nupa, Atopa Tonapa Nupa, the Utpam Topa, Respecto, Bevardo, I know the Utlabane, I know harping amoy. Nang Chatlobai and Tadore. Tanzasida, a murmur of approbation broke from those who listened. Chigi lines, text that Yaudabaniko. The ADC tapped the rebel on the shoulder, and between the two soldiers, without a word, he marched into the waiting car. Approbation means yaning ba. A murmur of approbation broke from those who listen. Hoziki sipai makok sinangang was a tari ba mimiam duna yaning mo tawala. Yes, sinapaz kan bayay, sinapaz haloy daw ni sinapaz. Jam thona pa sinapaz kamay hatoy no. Tanjasida, the ADC tapped the revolver on the shoulder, and between the two soldiers, without a word, he marched to the waiting car. The listeners approved what the general said. The ADC of the general touched the rebel on the shoulder. Tap means hit lightly with the fingers. Could not tak tha, but the lingzum that my shoulder the tak thai as the ADC. And between the two soldiers, without a word, he marched to the waiting car. The ADC of the general touched the rebel on the shoulder with his fingers, signaling that he would not be killed and that he should obey the general's instructions. Two soldiers took the man to the waiting car. Car the poor chakre. He marched between the two soldiers without speaking a word. My friend stopped, and for a time I was silent. I must explain that he was a Guatemalan and he spoke to me in Spanish. I have translated what he told me as well as I could, but I have made no attempts to tone down his rather high-flown language. To tell the truth, I think it suits the story. The writer's friend stopped his story there, and the writer remained silent for some time. The writer says that his friend was a Guatemalan, and he narrated his story in Spanish language in a bombastic or high-flown style. The writer says that he has translated his friend's story into English as far as he could, but he made no attempts to tone down, or rather to make milder, his greatly bombastic language. As a matter of fact, the style suits the story. Tone down means to make milder, and high-flown language means greatly bombastic language. What is similar but the writers ki mamana ba to min legi ba khambra writers to min lay man hai ai gi wari li ba gi marup se Spanish machani man na li wari se Spanish tane ai ngam ngai man li lon zaine wari sing zaine English ta handoe ado mana ko gi sinari ba khatang henjin ba wahi wata jidi ai madudi kitang tone down tawna ba ai kitang chamda na ba laitho na ba de hona dre kai gi no di wari ziga sinari ba language ga yam chana ba don tawri man hai I think I get them paraziki title mamai the dark labor, mamai the dark labor, the pa, mamai the dark labor, the pahaza. My darks come my leg even was the writers in the first hung a question never. I was hung a man. But how did he get the scar? I asked at length. I hung ever last. Mamai the ducks who come my leg even on. Oh, that was due to a bottle that burst when he was opening it. A bottle of ginger ale. A doctor. A doctor, the writers, Mamma come ever. You li ma hang do ko da you li pokarak na mama the ket ki bane da you ko li ma chet na haire so yam chati chathi bu nupa lan ga chat pada yekna bagi bom ma chet na pan ba so ki man ba dak di you li hang do ko da kai boy le ginger ale is a beer name with ginger flavor singy flavor katang yaw ba beer ma khalamani ka all that was due to a bottle that burst when he was opening it mama ga dak tro asidi you bottle li ma hang do ko da li do pokarak na glass ma chet yat ki bane I never liked it, said I. Us. Adum tang di palm de he. Writers in hide a minute. Ngasai, why is it like palm? Because the dark lake give him wondo. Dark to me, puna with the mamma kin the tinted with the town yanted, but the boom pokai with the boom but a pan with the soap and daddy. Because nobody white got chanagadaba. Adugadi, you lily hung up with the bottle, lily pokai glass pokai yat pinedum tang di palm. So, this is a wonderful story with a twist at the end. Lorek pada twist mahapsalai ko adu wari sida koina akoigi lan gi maramda nungsibi gi maramda human relationship ki matangda adi khangning ba curiosity gi matangda adi perception versus reality khallu bana ama oiram bana ama haibana chingba mayam sig matangda akoina fazaba wari ma mayam da loina mak explore toba fazaba wari bana ina grang sa. This is a very interesting story, a world famous short story, and an immortal one also. I think you would like the story. Thank you very much.